Financial loss for refraining from Lashon Hara.
Okay.
Speaking Lashon Hara is not justified, even if it will save you from a huge financial loss. One is required to surrender his entire fortune in order not to violate this negative precept. Example, Mr. Goldberg's boss wanted his employers to make derisive comments about his competitors. The more caustic the comments, the higher the employee rose in his estimation. Mr. Goldberg was fired from his job because he refused to speak Lashon Hara. Mr. Goldberg's loss of income caused him and his family much suffering and hardship. Nevertheless, he would not have been allowed to act differently in these circumstances. Okay, continue on that theme. When it is difficult to remain silent. If you find yourself in the company of people who are gossiping about others and you're not able to leave them, even though you may feel uncomfortable being the only silent person present, you are nevertheless forbidden to speak Lashon Hara. No person likes to appear dull or unsociable. However, consolation is the reward for such silence, which is in direct proportion to the difficulty endured. This is in Pirkei Avot. Remember, it's better for a person to be considered a fool throughout his entire life, amen, than to be considered wicked for one moment in the eyes of Hashem. Concerning such situations, the following words of our sages definitely apply. For every second that one remains silent, he will merit reward of a magnitude that is beyond comprehension, of even malachim. Okay, I think that's...
I can tell you, Kevin, I loved what you said there. I love that you said, even if you're seen as fools by men,
yeah,
and you're seen as not wicked by Hashem, because all of us, including myself, we all care what people think to a certain extent. It's normal. And to to redirect our value system to considering what Hashem considers a priority. I think you said an amazing thing there. Amazing.
And also, and people say, I've been in situations where I don't want to say anything negative. And the people say, well, it's not so bad. And sometimes from people say this. Yeah. We're all on such a low level. It means nothing to where you are, as we know. And yesterday, can I give you an example? Okay, it's slightly not related. It's going back to Chilul Hashem. I'm walking down Hayardin, the street that I live in, and there's a chassid, the oak wearing like the black robe and the plants. And he wasn't wearing a strong. He's walking and he walks and he just knocks down this cork-in-it, this electric scooter. And this oak, three people said, the oak says, Achi, gever, which means men, pick it up. No, he just walks away. Joking. It wasn't in his way, he just knocked it over and just left it lying. It's someone's property.
I think he learned Talmud.
Huh?
But he learned it wrong.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And this is an oak looking the part because it's unbelievable.
I know. I just laughed, Kevin, because the irony is he learned our Gemara, but he interpreted it wrong. It's exactly the case we're dealing with in our Gemara. Funny enough.
Well, that's the reason why I come to these shiurim, because if I did it by myself, I'd probably also be knocking over scooters.
That just shows that a chassid that doesn't learn the Gemara properly ends up being... But you know what? He's missing basic derech eretz, which any goy would have.
Yeah, and it's not exactly a good ad from people what he did there. He just
something, Kevin.
It wasn't in his way. I promise you, it was the white pavement was white. He just knocked it over, knocked it down.
I'm not trying to defend him, but let me just give you a scenario that might be taking place with this guy. Sometimes people they're not religious. They dress up for him so they can raise money for themselves. It's a scam. I'm just saying, he could be one of those guys. I sometimes see them at our shoes. I'm not sure if they're all religious. They're asking for money, and sometimes it's just for themselves.
Okay, maybe a few hours later, after seeing them, she'll drive past the McDonald's or the doll's house. Then you'll see.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
I'll do that next.
You know what? I mean, guys, I did something stupid. Where you go to the wall and there are people that ask for money. Guy had his cup out. He looked disheveled. So I threw in a handful of
coffee.
And the guy had a cup of coffee. It was a cup of coffee. He started to shout at me.
I did that near the JSC exchange when it was in town. I was doing an audit there, and then I walked into some clothes shop because there's in the old days all the nice clothes shops were right there by the stock exchange, and they were quite good pricing. So I thought, let me go and do my lunch break, go look at the shops, and it's exactly what I did. And when I went in, I walked into one of the shops. There's a guy sitting there on a chair holding a cup, and older guy, like 60 or something, 65. He was probably 45, I was like 18, 19 or whatever, doing hardcore. And I did the same thing. I bring like a 50-cent piece or 5 rand note, 5 rand coin, whatever was available in those days. I just chucked it in, and the guy said, "What you doing? What you doing? Messing up my coffee." So I said, I thought you were a beggar, At all.
That's even worse, trying to justify that. But I mean, I also had a bad time the one time. I was checking out of a shop, and the cashier was sitting behind there. And, most women, when they're pregnant, have a stomach, but, their legs don't look fat. So this is what the good looking says. So when you're expecting, she says, "I'm not."
I've also done that.
That's embarrassing, man. So the best time to say it to a woman is when you're at a bus stop and you say, "When you're expecting," and they say, "I'm not," the bus to come, Hey, Stevie, good to see you.
Hey, Stephen.
How's it going, guys? Popped in for a while. Visitor.
How are you keeping? All right.
Yeah, right. And yourself? Yeah.
Stephen's Kaddish period is nearly done. Guys, can you believe it? You've never seen somebody that's, Stephen, I must say that both when your parents were alive and now that they've passed on, your absolute diligence to them is something we can all, we really respect. It's just amazing. And you know what? You do it with humbleness, you do it with effort. And I met your parents. I knew your mom more than your dad.
Yes, that's right. The time when you did the work for you, the time you came to my flat.
Yeah,
it was about 3 years ago. I think.
A few times and whatever. But I can tell you're nice people.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So it's not surprising you know.
Normally I say you check the post, but there's no check and no post. Yeah, sure.
But the way you judge parents or people is how the kids turn out. And Stephen, you're such a lovely guy. So I didn't know your parents. I can only presume that they were absolutely amazing because they produced a wonderful product.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you. And please God, my bracha for you, Stephen, is that you end up finding the right person and starting your own family where one day, God forbid, your children will do Kaddish for you. But I don't wish the Kaddish for you yet.
Yeah. You're right, no. 120 seconds.
And Damon, also for you to find somebody. So that's
the other part.
And for Kevin, yeah.
And for you, Kevin.
We all need something to take
except me.
But 120 years old.
I mean the Kaddish part.
Stephen, this is the singles Gemara group.
No.
Hey, there we go.
Arthur.
No, I'm just here for the technical. I'm just observing.
Okay, I'm going to stick it.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm recording.
All right. So look, we're dealing with an issue that's about to come up with the Gemara of what sort of humiliation penalties does a person have to pay if you hit somebody. Now, obviously, you have to pay actual damage and all sorts of other bills, pain, medical bills, convalescent. But what we're talking about is we're talking about some sort of damage where it's not as aggressive. It's not like two guys are getting in a bar fight. The last case we deal with is a slightly more aggressive nature, but it starts off with cases of humiliation where it is embarrassing, but it's not going to leave a person in a wheelchair or severely hurt, but it's extremely embarrassing. Okay. So I'll tell you exactly where we are. How many people admittedly did their homework or not? Stephen Herr is about to join.
Yeah. Can I make one quick comment, Damon, on that? Just too quick. Doesn't it say, and I read over the thing, but it says in the Torah, if somebody strikes someone, you're considered an evil person.
Absolutely.
So that's what I wondered. It didn't say that there. I mean, I went over it briefly, though.
Okay, so there's a difference between how Hashem views a person and the sort of court system that addresses issues of righting wrongs. So, I mean, we're dealing with two different issues here. I mean, obviously, we're dealing with issues like of refuge, we dealt with murder, etc. Obviously, all these things are wicked. But at the end of the day, one of the Noahide laws, which is incumbent upon every human being, is to set up courts of law, because otherwise there's going to be absolute anarchy. And if there's anarchy, then the good people, unfortunately, will fall victim to the stronger people. So all we're doing here is dealing with legal cases. That's all we're dealing with, under the premise of obviously a moral construct. But just because every time we have a case, it doesn't deal with the evilness of the case, doesn't mean the case isn't evil. All right, so let's get straight in it. It's 27b2, and the Gemara discusses a new section of the Mishnah on 27b2, and we're discussing compensation payable for embarrassing somebody or hitting them. Okay, so the embarrassment is primarily talking about hitting. Now, the degree of embarrassment will determine how much money you pay for that particular form of embarrassment. So this is the case. So Rav Chisda sent a message to Rav Nachman, and basically the sages said that there's certain different payments according to the level of embarrassment. So if you strike somebody with one's knee, in other words, you knee a person, it's 3 selaim. Okay, the payment of a kick is 5 selaim, and the payment for striking somebody with a donkey saddle is 13 selaim. Why do you think a donkey saddle is much higher than if you look at a kick or kneeing somebody?
Covers a larger surface area, can do more damage.
No, in fact,
No,
if
it's
you kick
actually-
somebody,
Okay.
if you kick somebody, your actual damages are gonna be higher because of the amount of physical devastation to the body. But what's more embarrassing? We're talking purely about humiliation.
So what's the
So-
selling then?
So it can be that you have a case where actual damage is far higher and the humiliation aspect is lower. It doesn't mean that when the actual damage is higher, the humiliation necessarily goes higher. They worked out at different factors. Does that make sense, Akivs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're two different equations completely. And why is a donkey's saddle 13 selaim? Because if somebody took off a saddle from a horse and started slapping you in public, everybody's going to laugh. It's highly embarrassing. So that obviously gets 30 selaim. There is a discussion in the Gemara, does that also include an open hand slap, which is far more embarrassing than a fist? This is very interesting. A fist is a man's way to get hit. So when two men are fighting, they're punching each other. Now, the actual damage of a fist is far more devastating for Nezek Shalom. But what is more embarrassing? Getting slapped like a girl. Do you get what I'm saying? So getting slapped is equivalent to actually 30 silaim. There is a discussion in the Gemara because that's highly embarrassing.
Damon, did you mean 13 or 30?
13.
13.
13, like the bar mitzvah age.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so, but what is the payment for striking somebody with the handle of a shovel or the blade of a shovel? So let me just clear this up in terms of a blade of a shovel. If you clip somebody on the edge with the blade of a shovel, what's going to happen is you're going to end up either going to the city of refuge or getting there for murder, or certainly in responsible being shaman. That blade is like a samurai sword. We're talking about the flat end. So the flat end, or you're talking about the handle of a shovel. So basically what happened here is Rav Chisda wrote this to Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman sent him a supply. He said, Chisda, are you collecting penalties in Babylonia? So what did he mean by that? What he means by that is as follows, is there was a special concept of smicha. Now, we did this Akiva. You joined this year late. I think Gavin did also. We're in Sanhedrin in 14b. We discussed how smicha actually works. So the rabbinical ordination came, we first learned it from Moshe, of how he put his hands on Joshua and he transferred Ruach HaKodesh, and there was a whole line of linearship when Yitro told him how to set up court systems, etc., in the Sanhedrin. So smicha could only come according to a particular chain. And when that chain occurred, it had to occur within the land of Eretz Israel. So smicha couldn't be conferred out of Eretz Israel. Eventually, with the diaspora, you had a case where it became a necessary, pragmatic activity. But there was a restraint, and that restraint is you couldn't deal with penalty cases out of the land of Eretz Israel. So Babylonia could deal with monetary cases of compensation, but not penalties. Okay. Now, penalties have three particular aspects to them. Do you guys remember? Do you want me to test you? Do you want me to put you out of your misery? For the sake of just
tell us, Damon.
Okay, so the thing of it is that humiliation is generally seen as a penalty. Why? Is because compensation is if I take 200 zuz from you and I steal it from you, right? Or let's be specific. My ox causes your ox damage of 183 zuz, and it's a muad ox, and I owe you nezek shalom, I owe you the full damages, and it's not half payment damages from the gufa of the animal. I have to pay you 183 zuz back for that particular damage. Since that's a case, that's compensating you for your financial loss of what it cost you. That's not a penalty. So that's a mammon. That's an actual compensation. A knas, which is a penalty, would be a case where, say, for example, in a case of theft, I steal 100 zuz from you. I have to pay back the actual amount plus the penalty of the capital amount. So I pay you back 200 zuz. So the 100 zuz is the actual compensation for what I stole. And the extra amount of the actual sum times two. In other words, the one is the primary sum of compensation and the other one is the knas, the penalty. That penalty supersedes actual damage. So one of the characteristics of a penalty is when it supersedes damage. In other words, I've cost you 100 and I have to pay you 200. Why? Because I'm playing games and I didn't come clean and say, listen, I did you wrong. You don't have to pay. If you come and admit your crime before the court is troubled, you only have to pay mammon, the actual amount. Penalties are only if you aggravate the court and you put somebody through the ordeal of taking you to court. Okay? So one of the characteristics of penalties is it supersedes the actual damage. The second thing of it is it's generally a knas, is a fixed amount. Okay. Now there is an argument in this Gemara that humiliation isn't a penalty because it's different amounts. But I would argue with that opinion, and I'm sure I've got Rabbonim to hold by, is that in fact it is a fixed amount. We learned that if you slap somebody with a saddle, it's 13 silaim, which means that's a fixed amount. If you do a different sort of level of humiliation, it's 3 silaim or 5 silaim. That again is a fixed amount. It doesn't all have to be the same amount for different levels of humiliation. So that opinion I wouldn't agree with, because as long as the sum is fixed. So what we're saying here is Rav Nachman turned around to Chisda and said to him, listen, so when are you judging penalties in Babylonia? I don't understand what your question is. What was the question? Because he said, listen, what's the payment for striking somebody with the handle of a shovel or the blade of a shovel? He said, I don't even understand why you would ask such a question. It's not relevant. You in Babylonia, you're judging cases. It's a penalty case. Why is it a penalty case? Because it fits in one definition. Generally, a mammon, by the strict definition, a compensation is when you sustained a financial loss of an exact amount, and I have to pay you back that exact amount for damage. Therefore, that is compensation. If I slap you, although I'm giving you money back, you never feel compensated.
Okay, but so the slap is just we fine you for just stepping out of line.
Exactly. That's exactly it. The penalty, I couldn't think of a better word. It's exactly that, a fine. And I'll give you a perfect example. If you look at Adim Zomamim, what they tried to do to their brothers, that's what's done to them. Now, they weren't successful. So that proves it's a penalty. It's not like they cost the person and was paid back in compensation. They only tried to do it. So that, in fact, is a penalty. Here, there's no penalty. You can't financially compensate. That's why it's called the death penalty. Why is it called the death penalty? You never bring back somebody's life by dying. It's a kapora for you, the murderer, to be able to exonerate yourself. And you stole life, so that life is stolen from you. And if you use that as an opportunity for a kapora, it would help. But you can never bring that person back. That's why it's known as the death penalty. Does that make sense? So Rav Chisda didn't understand what he was talking about here. So he said, look, he sent a message to Rav Nachman. He said, listen, there was a water cistern that belonged to two people. And they had an arrangement that each day one of them would draw water from the cistern. So once it happened that one of the partners came and he was drawing water on a day that wasn't his, and the other partner said to him, look, this is my day, and please, you need to come on your day. The guy just ignored him, paid no attention to him, and then the complainant took the handle of a shovel and struck him with it. Now, immediately, what is your particular view of this? Just before I go on, just for a couple of seconds, what do you each feel about this? Do you think it's extreme?
No, not at all.
Why not, Arth?
Well, from what I can see, I'll give an example which I listened to, which you learn. If somebody's breaking into your car, right? You don't take pictures and then call the cops and go through the whole thing. You take immediate action because otherwise they're going to steal your car. You were stealing water, and if they kept doing this, they'd actually run out of water, and he'd suffer a loss. So he has a full right.
Excellent. In other words, you've tried every other method to try and ask the guys to stop. You were a gentleman, you asked, etc. And some people, their hearing gets better when they get hit by a spade.
Hardware.
It's amazing. It's amazing how it works. You get a crack on your skull and your hearing clears up. It's amazing.
Block eardrums, what can I say?
Wake up call.
So exactly as Arthur said, is that you've begged the person, you've pleaded. Some people don't respond when you're nice. And what they're doing is they're stealing. It's not their day. So what is the implication if they steal a bit of water? Guys, it's not like today where you've got the South African Rand water board and that there's unlimited water and you can leave the tap and you're paying a couple of rand for the water. You're living in a desert. It's in Eretz Yisrael. You're living in a place where water is as precious as gold. And if somebody takes your water, you can have a situation where you or your animals die of thirst and your crops will die. And it can lead to absolute financial devastation. This is not a minor case of somebody just taking a meal that doesn't belong to them or a little bit of water where there's unlimited supply. This person can cause your life to go off the rails. So in that particular case, Arthur's correct. So Rav Nachman says exactly it. So the offending partner paid no attention to him, and the complainant took the handle of the shovel and struck him with it. So this is what Rav Nachman responded to Rav Chisda. Let him strike his partner even 100 blows with the shovel's handle. He would not be liable to pay at all, because even according to the one who says that a person may not enforce the law for himself, in other words, if you've got legal mechanism, you need to go the legal route. He agrees that where a loss would result from his inaction, a person may enforce the law for himself. So what are we talking about here? Is that if this sort of case took a month to go to court, in that period of time, the water could be drained, he could lose his crops, his animals could die, and there could be very serious ramifications. Also, Rav Nachman talks about a case of how easy is it to prove how much water somebody stole. This guy could have been stealing it for a long time. He could have been coming in the middle of the night and taking it. You just happened to catch him now. That's all. So this guy needs to be remedied very quickly. So we're saying that you don't have to go to the court if it's a case where you could suffer a financial loss. The Gemara now cites the dispute mentioned by Rav Nachman, for it was stated Rav Yehuda said that a person may not enforce the law for himself, But Rav Nachman says that a person may enforce the law for himself. So you've got Rav Yehuda on the one side that said you can't enforce the law for yourself, and Nachman that says that you actually can. Okay.
Just make a point. It's not a question, just an observation. Is that people can abuse this? That's the problem. You know, I like it and I understand it to take action immediately before this escalates, and it has devastating consequences. But people can honestly take advantage of it and become what do they call them? These
lawless.
heroin.
A lawless society.
No, martyr.
What do you mean a martyr?
What's it when a person takes
Vigilante.
revenge? Yeah, vigilante. That.
Vigilante, yeah.
Vigilante. Okay, Stephen, that was good. I was thinking of the word.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank
I
you,
couldn't get the word out. Thank you.
So Gavin's got an excellent point. There's a discussion with the Nimukei Yosef in the Shulchan Aruch and the Meiri, right? And also in the Nisafot HaMishpat. I'll tell you where it is, even in the Chos and Mishpat, chapter 4, verse 1. So even in this Gemara, when we go in 28a, it's going to be discussed. So you can only do this when it's proven afterwards in court that he was the wronged party. So the other party, if he sues you, as long as you win in court, otherwise the person can sue the pants off you. So it has to be, you have to prove two things. He was in the wrong. You try to do legitimate warnings. Hopefully you had witnesses, objective witnesses, not employees, by the way, that rely on you for an income. That's not an objective witness. And that the guy wouldn't move no matter what. And that he was going to cost you a devastating loss. So Gavin's absolutely correct. That stops vigilantism. And that's what's discussed here. Okay, those are your sources, Gav, to prove you right.
Very good. Thank you. And they're strong. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so Rav Nachman said you can enforce the law for yourself. Rav Yehuda says you can't. Now, where there's nobody has a dispute if there's going to be a loss, Gavin. Even Rav Yehuda agrees with Rav Nachman as far as that's concerned. Where do they disagree? Where there will be no loss if he doesn't take action. Let me explain to you what we mean. Rav Yehuda says that a person may not enforce the law for himself, for since there will be no loss to him if he waits until a judge takes action, let him go before a judge. So that's exactly what you're saying. You can't get better company than Rav Yehuda, Gav. Yeah. That's exactly what you're saying. And he's saying, fine, if you're having a loss and you can't reason with the guy, that's fine. But if there's no loss, there's absolutely no reason why there should be anarchy or vigilantism. Now, Rav Nachman is of a different opinion. He said a person may enforce the law for himself, even in a case where no loss will result. For he is acting in accordance with the law. He does not have to trouble himself and go before a judge. Okay, so before we side with Rav Yehuda, let's just see if there's anything to support Rav Nachman. Does that make sense?
Can I just add another point? I apologize. It's not a question. Same thing. In secular law, you get a thing called an urgent interdict. Is there nothing like that in Judaism where you can go straight away to the court without having to wait?
So I think what happens is the legal system evolves in that there's certain matters that might relate in urgency. I don't know how long the court process took then. All I can say is that generally court processes, everything is urgent. In other words, the only time that like I tell you where there's emergent, I know what a court interdict is, but often it will happen in a case of domestic violence and things where there could be a murder or severe assault that would take place, where people are stuck in the same environment. But when it's a monetary dispute, or it goes to the Supreme Court where it has an effect on the whole country. Let's not get into politics. But when it has a mass effect, sometimes there's a court interdict or a way to speed up the process when other people are going to suffer from the ramifications, or a company could perhaps shut down and there are thousands of people that would lose their jobs. Does that make sense? But otherwise, every case is cover ground.
All right, cover. Go ahead.
All right. So court interdicts are very difficult because everybody to their own mind, their case is urgent. Okay. So what happens is there's the bigger a town or city is, the less the resources are available to hear us. If you've only got a certain number of cases, in other words, sorry, if you've only got a certain number of judges and your cases exceed the amount of legal ability of judges to judge the case. In other words, in a town, if you've got maybe 6 judges, they can do 2 cases simultaneously, but the town's got 20,000 people. There's going to be a backlog. There's going to be a backlog. That's the bottom line. There might be cases that jump the queue, just like in medical cases, if somebody's about to lose the eye, if the retina detaches, they supersede the queue over somebody that's just getting ophthalmological advice. Okay, so there are certain urgencies. Anyway, let's go through this because we're losing track. So we want to see the reasons for each of the disputants, right? So Rav Yehuda said a person may not enforce the law for himself, for since there will be no loss to him if he waits until a judge takes action. Let him go before a judge. Rav Nachman says a person may enforce the law for himself, even in a case where no loss will result. For since he is acting in accordance with the law, he does not have to trouble himself and go before a judge. So Rav Nachman is pretty hardcore. He says, don't bother the courts, you're acting in accordance with the law. It does feel like vigilantism, but we need to understand why it's not. So the Gemara now is actually challenging Rav Yehuda. We thought he would challenge Rav Nachman, but the best way to see it from Rav Nachman's point of view is to actually challenge Rav Yehuda and say, well, maybe there's a flaw in his argument that you have to wait for a judge. Okay. Rav Kahana objected to Rav Yehuda's view on the basis of the following brisa. Ben Bugbug, who was obviously a famous rabbi, said, do not enter your neighbor's courtyard to retrieve your property without asking permission, lest you thereby appear as a thief. Okay, so rather smash his teeth and say to him, I'm taking my own property. This brisa indicates that a person is entitled to enforce the law for himself. So this is an argument for Rav Nachman, who says that you don't have to go there and basically you don't have to go there on a reconnaissance mission where you're going at 2 o'clock in the morning to take your thing back. Why? Because it would seem as though you're the thief and you're stealing. If somebody stole something of yours, you've got to go there and accost the person and say to him, you stole my thing, I want it back, it's mine. So in other words, you've got to actually challenge him up front, even if you have to smash his teeth to get the message home. So Rav Kahana would seem to indicate that Rav Yehuda is right. Rav Nachman is right. So Rav Yehuda is defending his view. Rav Yehuda said to Rav Kahana, is this a valid challenge in your opinion? Ben Bugbug, the ton of the brisa, is only an individual, and the other sages disagree with him. So the first thing he's saying is, look, anybody can find a single source of Ben Bugbug. In other words, I'm going to go, Rav Yehuda says, with the majority of the sages here. And since the majority follow my opinion, or I follow the majority's opinion, that is much more stronger than a divergent opinion. It's one opinion. So that's his first argument, Rav Yehuda, against Rav Nachman's argument of bringing Ben Bugbug. Okay. Then the Gemara offers a different answer. And this is Rav Yanai. So Rav Yanai says, what is the meaning of Ben Bugbug's derivative, smash his teeth? It means that the owner of the stolen item should attack his opponent claim in court. In other words, he's saying that it's not actually a literal term. When you say you're smashing somebody's teeth, it means that you're using the full force of the law against him. He's saying it's not a literal thing to get you to take physical violence. That's what Rav Yanai is saying. But there is a problem because it's challenged. The Bryce is instructing the owner to seek redress in court, and it says, and say to him. It should have stated, and they, the judges, say to him. So let me just go back and explain what it's saying. If you have a look at Rav Kahana's exact wording, and this is going to help you guys, he brings Ben Bugbug's term, and it says, do not enter your neighbor's courtyard to retrieve your property without asking permission, lest you appear as a thief. Now, this is the important wording. Rather smash his teeth and say to him, I'm taking my own property. So this is the argument against Rav Yanai, who turns around and says, listen, the court is just referring to a term that if the guy doesn't give you a property, if you're approaching him directly and say, I want my goods, and not creeping in like a thief in the night, there's a problem with Rav Yanai's brisa, because what's trying to happen here is Rav Yanai is bringing this case of Ben Bagbag, and he's saying, no, Ben Bagbag meant that you just have to redress the issue in court. And there's an objection that the Gemara has with this. What's the objection? If you look at the words, it says, and they, the judges, say to him, I'm taking my own object. It should have stated he is taking his own object. So let me explain to you what I'm saying, because in the Gemara it doesn't seem clear. What it's saying is when Bagbag says, rather smash his teeth and say to him, if he's talking about redressing it in court, the judges will say to him, take back your article. He won't say, take back my article. So the problem is the pronoun is incorrect. In other words, if Bagbag says, and say to him, in other words, the person who you're taking back your article from, that's mine and I want it, and you're talking about redressing it in court, the judges would never address the issue, say to him. It would say, the judges would say, they would say to him, not he would say to him. I don't know if you guys understand. So the wording, Kiva, do you understand or not? I can explain it in a simpler way.
No, I've been following.
So in other words, if I say to you, listen, this guy's giving you problems, he's got your stuff, I want you to go and smash his teeth and say to him, I'm taking back my own property. I'm addressing you on a one-to-one. The judges would never use that sort of term. The judges would address the person and say, you need to return his property. The way the wording of Bagbag is using, Ben Bagbag, is I'm addressing you and say, listen, smash his teeth and say to him he owes you your property. If I was a judge, I'd say, you need to return the articles to him. In other words, it's a third party instruction from the judges. This Ben Bagbag statement is as a first party instruction. In other words, if he gets clever with you, you must say to him, I'm taking back my own property. Right, if I was a judge and you were a judge and Gavin was a judge and Arthur and Kevin, we'd say, give him back his property. The wording doesn't deal with an issue of redressing it in court because it's not done in the plural and it's not done in an objective pronoun. It's done in a subjective pronoun. And the Gemara agrees with this. It says basically we can't resolve this issue because Rav Yana's interpretation is problematic because he's saying Ben Bagbag is asking us to take it to court where the judges say this to the individual, return his item. But that's not what Ben Bagbag is saying. It says, you go and say to the guy, give me back my item. Do you get what I'm saying, Gavin?
Yeah.
Anybody confused? Kev, do you got it, Arthur?
No, I got it.
I have to go over it again. I'm a bit tired today. I went over it. I need to just go over it again when I have a chance.
All right. So, Kev, all I'm saying...
A lot of information.
All right. So, are you not absorbing at the moment?
Some of it.
All right.
I know I get it. Just a lot of info in my mind's drifting a bit today.
All right. So. Listen, I'm gonna just bring the DAF summary. Good. Congratulations, guys. We finished the 27th DAF in under a week.
It's a miracle. Good stuff.
It's a miracle. Okay. So, Kevin, I just want to just bring in a couple of final points. Is that it's just an argument between Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman. They both agree. I need you to concentrate for a minute here. Yeah. They both agree that if you're going to lose money and you've begged the guy and you've asked him, you can by force ask him to, you can force him to stop. But we're going to learn in the 28th daf that if you take extreme force or if there's a more gentle way that you could do it, in that particular case, you are liable for damage. Just like when Akiva and I learned about a roidef, I don't know if Akiva learned this. I was at Mahasha, where you're saving somebody's life by stopping them from stabbing somebody with a knife. The first thing that you should do is try and shoot them in the leg. You don't shoot them in the heart. You want to stop the assailant, but you don't have a right to kill him if you can choose the least amount of aggressive force. And so to here, you don't have to whack the oak with the sharp end of the spade or anything else. I think it would suffice if you just maybe physically push him. You've got to go with the path of least resistance. We're going to learn this in the next stuff.
So just in addition.
So Rav Nachman and Rav Yehuda both say that when it's a case where you're going to lose, you're entitled to use physical force if no other method would work. Where they differ is Rav Nachman said, even if you're not going to have a loss, you're acting in the with the authority of the court and you don't need to trouble a judge. Whereas Rav Yehuda says, you can't just be a vigilante. And this brisa that's used to defend Rav Nachman, who says, well, you can't smash his teeth and take back your article. It does seem to be a proof for Rav Nachman of Ben Bagbag, but it's a lone opinion. The sages generally go with Rav Yehuda that you can't be a vigilante. Okay, that's all we're discussing. That's all. Nothing more complicated.
Confuse anyone, but I was learning this morning and basically going on how to be, say, sensitive. That you don't want to kill the assailant, but you just want to, say, make a blow, and that it goes down to the level that if someone was trying to save somebody, but God forbid he went wrong and he landed up, he couldn't save his life, it's tantamount to murder.
Wow. And it's so funny you learned it this morning.
Yeah.
Wow.
Kevin mentioned something else when we started. So, yeah.
Sure. So
another
guys,
piece in the puzzle.
Guys, we
Damon,
the time. Yeah.
Does this apply to someone that owes you money?
Okay, so that's a different stuff. We'll address it. Guys, we're on 28A1, and we've done almost the first half of the left-hand side of the page, so we've made good progress this week.
Okay, great.